Welcome to our deep dive into the world of cancer's past.
Yeah.
Today we'll be using Siddhartha Mukherjee's book, The Emperor of All Maladies, to kind of explore, how we've understood and treated cancer throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think we'll find some surprises along the way.
It's true. I think a lot of what we deal with today, with cancer research and treatment, is rooted in centuries of observation and, even assumptions along the way.
Right.
Missteps.
Yeah. So let's rewind the clock all the way back
Okay.
to ancient Egypt,
Wow.
3000 BC,
Okay.
the Edwin Smith Papyrus,
Oh,
one of the oldest medical texts.
right.
Already mentions a breast tumor.
Yeah. What's interesting is even back then, the physician Imhotep, recognized the tumor, but documented there was no treatment. It seems cancer was a pretty formidable opponent even back then.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what it must have been like to encounter this disease
Hmm.
with such limited tools and knowledge.
Yeah.
So fast forward to ancient Greece. We meet Hippocrates, who coined the term karkinos, meaning crab, to describe these tumors.
Ah, yeah. His choice of words was very insightful. He observed that tumors spread kind of like crab's legs,
Oh.
and that which we know now is a pretty accurate visual,
Yeah.
representation of how cancer can invade. He even attempted to distinguish between benign and malignant swellings,
Yeah.
but the underlying mechanisms were a mystery.
So they were recognizing patterns and classifying these tumors. Then enters Galen, the Roman physician,
Yes.
who builds upon Hippocrates' work but throws in a twist.
Yeah.
The black bile theory.
Ah, the black bile theory.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. For centuries, this idea dominated medical thinking in the West,
Mhm.
and it had a major impact on how cancer was treated
Right.
or not treated. The theory states that cancer was caused by an imbalance of humors in the body, black bile being the culprit. This led to the belief that cancer was a systemic disease,
Yeah.
affecting the whole body, rather than a localized one.
So surgeons were basically discouraged from operating
Exactly.
because it was thought that cutting out a tumor wouldn't address this underlying imbalance.
Right. Galen's theory essentially put a stop to surgical intervention for cancer for over 1,000 years. So a flawed theory hindered progress for centuries. It just highlights how ingrained ideas shape the course of history, even when wrong.
It's a reminder that challenging established ideas is so crucial, even when those ideas have been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
So we're stuck in this black bile rut for centuries until the Renaissance.
Yes.
Shakes things up a bit.
Correct.
Suddenly we have this renewed focus on anatomy thanks to pioneers like Andreas Vesalius.
Uh-huh.
Tell us about him.
He was a game changer. His meticulous dissections and drawings, published in his masterpiece, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, provided accurate depictions of the human body. And his work challenged the anatomical errors perpetuated for over 1,000 years.
So he's providing visual evidence. That contradicted these long-held beliefs.
Exactly.
This has been quite a shock to the medical establishment.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
And this shift towards evidence-based observation paved the way for a more scientific approach,
Yeah.
where theories had to be backed up by what could be seen and studied.
And this more scientific approach takes another leap forward in the 18th century with the surgeon Matthew Bailey. I was so struck by his dedication to documenting cancers in detail.
Bailey was remarkable. He painstakingly described and illustrated different cancers. And importantly, in his extensive observations, he could not find any trace of black bile that Galen had insisted was the root of the problem.
So he's basically debunking this long-held theory, not through philosophical argument, but through meticulous observation.
Exactly. It shifted the perception of cancer from this mysterious imbalance to an observable disease
Yeah.
that could be studied.
And this shift happens to coincide with some crucial breakthroughs in the 19th century. Anesthesia and antisepsis. Those seem like game changers for surgery in general.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd imagine even more so for cancer surgery.
Absolutely. Before these discoveries, even simple surgeries were incredibly dangerous. Anesthesia allowed for pain-free surgeries, and antisepsis reduced the risk of post-surgical infections. Suddenly, surgeons could attempt more complex procedures.
So these innovations really open the door for a new era of surgery, specifically the rise of radical surgery
Right.
as a primary treatment for cancer.
With these new tools, surgeons began to take a more aggressive approach to cancer. One pioneer was Theodore Billroth, who developed techniques to remove tumors from areas like the stomach, the intestines, even the larynx.
It's amazing to think about the skill and innovation it must have taken to perform such complex surgeries back then,
Yeah.
especially without the imaging technology we have today.
Absolutely. And then you have William Halsted, another prominent figure. He's known for developing the radical mastectomy for breast cancer, which involves removing not just the tumor, but the entire breast, surrounding lymph nodes and chest muscles.
Wow.
It was initially hailed as a breakthrough, with some patients experiencing long-term survival.
But I understand this radical approach later faced criticism for being overly aggressive and causing significant side effects.
That's right. As our understanding evolved, the pendulum swung back toward less invasive approaches. Halstead's radical mastectomy, while groundbreaking, eventually gave way to less disfiguring procedures. It's a reminder that even when we make progress, the long-term consequences need to be considered.
So up to this point, surgery was pretty much the only weapon in the fight against cancer.
Right.
But as we move into the 20th century, things start to change with the emergence of a new approach, chemotherapy.
Yes.
And the seeds of this revolution were planted by a brilliant German chemist named Paul Ehrlich.
Oh, Ehrlich was a visionary. He envisioned what he called magic bullets, chemicals that could target and destroy cancer cells, while sparing healthy cells. This was truly revolutionary and marked the beginning of a quest for systemic treatments that could attack cancer cells throughout the body.
It's fascinating how one person's vision can spark an entirely new field of research. But it's also a little ironic that the first successful chemotherapy agent wasn't discovered in a lab, but on a battlefield.
That's right. During World War I, a chemical warfare agent called nitrogen mustard was found to have a devastating effect on rapidly dividing cells, including cancer cells. This accidental discovery was a turning point.
It must have been a moment of both horror and hope, seeing the destructive power of these chemicals, but also recognizing their potential to fight this deadly disease.
Absolutely.
And this is where the story of Sidney Farber comes in.
Right. That's right. Farber was a pathologist focused on childhood leukemia, a disease considered a death sentence. He began experimenting with antifolates, chemicals that interfere with cell division. And he saw some remarkable, albeit temporary, responses in his young patients. One case in particular captured the world's attention, that of Robert Sandler, a young boy with leukemia who experienced a dramatic remission after treatment with Farber's antifolates.
So this one case, this one boy, helped fuel a wave of interest in chemotherapy research.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the scientific breakthrough. Farber's work and Robert Sandler's story captured the public imagination. A radio broadcast helped launch the Jimmy Fund, which raised millions of dollars for cancer research. Public awareness and fundraising suddenly became crucial drivers, and that legacy continues today.
It's a powerful example of how science and storytelling can intertwine to create real impact.
Yeah.
And while those early chemotherapies were far from perfect, they represented a bold new frontier.
Absolutely, they did. The idea of using chemicals to attack cancer cells throughout the body was a total paradigm shift, and it laid the foundation for more sophisticated approaches that were to come.
Yeah. I think this is where we should pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, from ancient theories to the dawn of chemotherapy, but the story of cancer's past is far from over. I'm eager to delve into what happens next.
Me too. We're on the cusp of some truly groundbreaking discoveries. That will change how we understand this disease forever.
So for our listeners, stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into the history of cancer in the next part of this episode.
Picking up where we left off, the discovery of combination chemotherapy in the 1960s really was a game changer.
Right.
You could almost feel the optimism in the air.
So instead of using just a single drug later, researchers started experimenting with cocktails of different chemotherapeutic agents.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thinking behind this approach?
It was all about attacking cancer on multiple fronts.
Okay.
By using drugs that work in different ways.
Mhm.
They hope to overwhelm the cancer cells and prevent them from developing resistance. Emil Frey and Emil Freireich at the National Cancer Institute were pioneers in this field.
Right.
And they saw some incredible results, particularly in childhood leukemia and Hodgkin's disease.
I imagine this must have been a pretty intense experience for the patients.
Yeah.
Were the side effects even more severe with this multi-drug approach?
Yeah, you're right to bring that up. The side effects were harsh. Patients experienced debilitating nausea, hair loss, immune suppression. But for many, these short-term hardships were worth enduring for the chance at a cure.
It must have been a difficult balance,
Yeah.
pushing the limits of treatment while also trying to manage the impact on patients' quality of life.
Right.
And wasn't there also the issue of relapse?
Uh-huh.
I understand that even with these aggressive regimens, some patients eventually saw their cancer return.
That's a crucial point. While combination chemotherapy led to dramatic improvements in survival rates, it wasn't a foolproof solution. One of the biggest challenges was the blood-brain barrier, a protective shield that prevents many drugs from reaching the brain.
Oh, right.
Some cancers, particularly leukemia, had a tendency to relapse in the central nervous system where they were harder to target with chemotherapy.
So it was a step forward, but with limitations.
Exactly.
And around this time, we have Donald Pinkel in Memphis, who was really pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in terms of treatment intensity.
Yeah, Pinkel was a controversial figure. He believed that to cure childhood leukemia, you had to hit it hard. And he wasn't afraid to use aggressive protocols that included intrathecal injections,
Okay.
delivering chemotherapy directly into the spinal fluid and cranial radiation to target the brain.
These sound like incredibly intense treatments, especially for children.
They were. And while his methods were undoubtedly controversial, they did result in long-term survival for some children who would have otherwise had no chance. It's a complex legacy to grapple with balancing the potential for cure with the undeniable hardship of such aggressive treatments.
This brings us to the 1970s and President Nixon's declaration of the war on cancer.
Right.
What impact did this declaration have on the field?
Well, Nixon's declaration led to a massive increase in funding for cancer research. Suddenly, there was a national commitment to conquer this disease, and scientists were empowered to pursue new avenues of research. It was a time of great optimism and hope, but it also had its downsides.
What do you mean?
Well, some argued that the war on cancer metaphor, while powerful, also oversimplified a very complex problem. They felt it created unrealistic expectations for a quick victory and focused too heavily on finding a cure rather than on understanding the fundamental biology of cancer.
So there was a risk of putting all our eggs in one basket, so to speak, instead of exploring a more diverse range of approaches.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that Mary Lasker, a philanthropist and tireless advocate for cancer research, played a crucial role in shaping the national response to cancer. She understood that sustained funding and a focus on basic science were essential for making real progress.
So it was a time of both progress and debate, with a lot of money and energy being poured into cancer research, but also a growing realization that a simple cure might be elusive.
Right.
And amidst this backdrop, we see a significant shift in focus towards understanding the genetic basis of cancer.
Yeah. The shift was driven by the burgeoning field of molecular biology. In the 1980s and 1990s, researchers made groundbreaking discoveries that revealed cancer to be at its core a genetic disease. They identified oncogenes, genes that can promote uncontrolled cell growth, and tumor suppressor genes, which act like brakes on cell division.
Can you give us some specific examples of these discoveries that really changed the game?
The discovery of the race oncogene was a major breakthrough. It showed that a single mutated gene could be responsible for transforming a normal cell into a cancerous one. And then you have Knudsen's two-hit hypothesis, which explained how mutations in both copies of a tumor suppressor gene could lead to cancer.
Okay.
This hypothesis was beautifully validated with the discovery of the RB gene, which is mutated in retinoblastoma, a childhood eye cancer.
So instead of just observing what cancer looked like, scientists were now starting to understand the molecular machinery driving its development. This had to be a major turning point in terms of treatment strategies, right?
Absolutely. Understanding the genetic basis of cancer opened the door for the development of targeted therapies, drugs that could specifically target cancer cells based on their unique molecular profiles. It was like having a guided missile that could zero in on the enemy while sparing innocent bystanders.
This sounds like a huge leap forward from the shotgun blast approach of traditional chemotherapy.
It was. And some of the early success stories with targeted therapies were truly remarkable. Let's talk about Herceptin, for example, a targeted therapy for HER2 positive breast cancer. Dennis Slamon, a researcher who was convinced of Herceptin's potential, faced a lot of skepticism and obstacles in bringing this drug to market. But his persistence paid off.
Right.
Herceptin has transformed the treatment of this type of breast cancer.
It's inspiring to hear about scientists who are willing to fight for their ideas even when they face resistance. It's a reminder that breakthroughs don't always come easy.
They don't. And then there's Gleevec, a targeted therapy for chronic myeloid leukemia or CML. This was once a devastating and often fatal disease. But Gleevec turned it into a manageable condition for many patients, allowing them to live relatively normal lives.
These are incredible stories of hope and progress made possible by a deeper understanding of the molecular mechanisms driving cancer. But I imagine there are still challenges to overcome, even with these targeted therapies.
Of course, cancer cells are incredibly adaptable. One of the biggest hurdles with targeted therapies is drug resistance. Over time, cancer cells can evolve and find ways to evade even the most sophisticated drugs.
So it's like an ongoing arms race, constantly trying to stay one step ahead of the cancer cells.
Yeah, in a way it is. And what about prevention?
Right.
Have there been any major breakthroughs in understanding how to prevent cancer in the first place?
Well, that's a good question because it seems like we've been so focused on treatment up to this point.
Yeah, prevention is a crucial part of the cancer fight. One of the most significant breakthroughs was the discovery of the link between smoking and lung cancer. The work of Richard Dahl and Ernst Winder in the 1950s was instrumental in establishing this connection and ultimately led to public health campaigns that saved countless lives.
That's a powerful example of how scientific research can have a real-world impact on public health.
It is. And another important development was the Ames test, developed by Bruce Ames, which allowed scientists to identify potential carcinogen substances that can cause cancer by their ability to cause mutations in bacteria.
So that's interesting.
This provided a way to screen chemicals and reduce our exposure to harmful substances.
So it's like having an early warning system to identify potential dangers before they even cause cancer in humans.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the discovery of the hepatitis B virus and its association with liver cancer. This highlighted the role of chronic inflammation and infection in cancer development. It's not just about avoiding toxins, it's also about understanding how chronic infections can contribute to cancer risk.
So we're starting to see a more nuanced picture of the factors that contribute to cancer development.
Right.
It's not just about lifestyle choices. It's also about understanding the interplay between our genes, our environment, and even infectious agents.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the Pap smear developed by George Papanicolaou, which revolutionized cervical cancer prevention by allowing for the early detection and treatment of precancerous lesions.
So by catching those abnormal cells early, we can prevent them from developing into full-blown cancer. It's a testament to the power of early detection and preventative screening.
Yeah, it is. But I remember reading about a paper that was published back in the 1980s that claimed we were losing the war on cancer.
Oh, really?
How does that square with all the progress we've been talking about?
That's a good question. I'd like to hear more about that.
You're likely thinking of the paper by John Baylor and Elaine Smith, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which made waves at the time. They argued that despite significant investments in research, cancer mortality rates were not declining as much as expected.
So they were essentially raising a red flag saying, hey, we're not winning this fight.
Yeah. In a way, yes. Their analysis sparked a lot of debate, but I think it's important to look at the bigger picture. While some types of cancer, like lung cancer, were indeed on the rise due to smoking, other cancers were showing significant declines thanks to advances in treatment and prevention. What they called a stalemate was actually a dynamic battlefield with both victories and setbacks.
It sounds like a classic case of missing the forest for the trees. Focusing on overall mortality rates without considering the nuances of different cancer types can be misleading.
Exactly. And since then, we've seen tremendous progress in many areas, as we've discussed. The fight is far from over, but we're armed with a much deeper understanding of cancer's complexity and a growing arsenal of tools to combat it.
So to recap, we've seen a dramatic shift from the era of radical surgery and early chemotherapy to a more nuanced understanding of cancer's genetic basis and the development of targeted therapies. We've also learned a lot about the importance of prevention and early detection. But I'm curious, where do we go from here? What are the next frontiers in cancer research and treatment?
That's a great question, and it leads us to some truly exciting areas of research that are shaping the future of cancer care.
Well, I'm all ears. Let's dive into those next frontiers in the final part of our deep dive. So we've journeyed from ancient theories to the rise of targeted therapies. What's next? What's on the horizon in the fight against cancer?
One of the most exciting frontiers right now is immunotherapy.
Okay.
It harnesses the power of the immune system to fight cancer. It's like, giving the body's natural defenses a boost, making them more adept at recognizing and destroying cancer cells.
So instead of attacking cancer cells directly with drugs, we're training the immune system to do the job itself. I remember reading about this, but it sounds like science fiction. Is this really working in patients?
It's not fiction. And it is showing remarkable results for certain types of cancers. CAR T-cell therapy is a good example. It's been making headlines.
So can you break that down a bit? What exactly is CAR T-cell therapy?
So in CAR T-cell therapy, a patient's T-cells, a type of white blood cell, that plays a key role in immunity. They're collected and genetically engineered. In the lab, these modified T-cells are called Cy-R T-cells,
Okay.
and they're infused back into the patient. And because they've been reprogrammed, they can now recognize and attack cancer cells with remarkable precision.
So it sounds like we're really starting to crack the code of the immune system and figure out how to direct its power against cancer.
Exactly. And that's just one example. There are other types of immunotherapy that work in different ways, checkpoint inhibitors, which release the brakes on the immune system, allowing it to attack cancer cells more aggressively. It's rapidly evolving and has immense potential.
So we're essentially turning the tables,
Yeah.
making cancer the target of the immune system.
Yes.
And what about personalized medicine, precision oncology?
Yeah.
That seems like it's also playing a big role in shaping the future of cancer care.
Right. Personalized medicine is all about moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to treatment. Each patient's cancer is unique, driven by specific genetic and molecular alterations. By understanding these differences, we can tailor treatments to be more precise and effective.
So instead of giving everyone the same chemo regimen, we're analyzing the specific mutations in each patient's tumor and choosing drugs based on that information.
Exactly. And it's not just about choosing the right drugs, it's also about identifying patients who are most likely to benefit from certain treatments and sparing those who might experience more harm than good.
It seems like this personalized approach also has implications for prevention and early detection.
Absolutely. By understanding an individual's genetic predispositions, we can tailor prevention strategies and screening recommendations to fit their risk profile. For example, someone with a family history of breast cancer might undergo genetic testing, and if they have certain mutations, might opt for more frequent mammograms or even preventative surgery.
So it's about empowering individuals to take control of their health
Yep.
and make informed decisions based on their own unique circumstances.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about our genes and the factors that contribute to cancer, the better we are at making choices that reduce our risk and improve chances of early detection.
But realistically, this kind of personalized medicine must come with accessibility challenges.
Right.
Not everyone can afford genetic testing or these cutting-edge therapies.
You're right. Ensuring equitable access to these advancements is a crucial challenge. Personalized medicine can't truly revolutionize cancer care if it's only available to a few. We need to work towards a system where these innovations are accessible and affordable.
So it's not just about scientific progress, it's about social justice and making sure everyone benefits from these discoveries.
It is, and it's something we need to advocate for. The future of cancer care depends not only on scientists and technologies, but on a healthcare system that prioritizes equity and access for all.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the history of cancer. We've covered a lot, from ancient misconceptions to the latest frontiers. What's striking to me is how far we've come in understanding this disease.
It is remarkable. It's a testament to all the researchers, physicians, and patients who contributed to this journey.
We've seen moments of triumph and tragedy, setbacks and breakthroughs. But one thing is clear, the fight against cancer is far from over.
It's not.
And as we move forward, I think it's important to remember that cancer isn't a single entity, but rather a collection of incredibly complex diseases.
Right. Yeah.
So instead of looking for a single cure for cancer, we need to embrace the complexity and develop personalized approaches that are tailored to each individual.
Exactly. The future of cancer care lies in this kind of precision medicine, and it's already starting to transform the way we treat and prevent this disease.
Well, we'll leave you with this. Knowing all we've learned about the path we've taken so far, how do you think our past experiences will shape the future of cancer research and treatment? Until next time, keep diving deep.